All right. Just looking for the cue from the back there. Should we kick this off? Good to go? Okay. Awesome. Well, good morning. We'll wait for a little settling here if anyone's coming in or out, but I want to welcome you to our franchise panel. There's a long, sophisticated name of this panel in the program, but I really think of this as the panel to discuss the art and the business of what has been come to known as the franchise. And we are really lucky to have such a great, diverse group of experts on the panel today. And Christina, Greg, Jeff, Peter, and Justin are going to introduce themselves fully. But it's important to note that collectively this group represents major studios, production companies, the world of academia and think tanks, and innovative commercial production companies. And the broader point is that there's a connective tissue between all of these panelists, and I'm sure they appreciate that sort of disgusting metaphor, the connective tissue that is woven between them. But they're all custodians of franchise at different points along the lifeline of a property, whether that's the ideation of an IP, supporting a motion picture release, or extending the narrative between films and into other mediums. So we're going to have a really exciting discussion. I think this is a very relevant and timely conversation. I'll just quickly say and get this out of the way. I'm Josh Feldman. I'll be moderating. I'm an executive producer at Telltale Games, which is the studio behind the episodic game format, and we're principally known for the Walking Dead episodic game. Previously, I produced digital films and content for the Halo video game franchise, and then I spent many years working in film, TV, and digital for Tom Hanks's Playtone company. So I am really thrilled to be moderating this panel because I'm as excited as I hope all of you are to hear from our experts. So without further ado, why don't we start with Jeff and we'll go right down. I'd love for these guys to introduce themselves, talk about what they do at their respective companies, and any key projects that they may want to mention right off the bat.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Jeff Long. I am a kind of a strange hybrid sitting at the intersection of academia and industry. I am currently the creative director for the World Building Media Lab and World Building Institute at USC. But before that, I spent 5 years at Microsoft as a co-founder of Microsoft's narrative design team, as well as a part of their future media and entertainment think tank, and that's where I met Josh the first time. A lot of what we do at the World Building Lab is looking at new world-centric narrative design practices, which really is kind of the common element across those two parts. As back at Microsoft, what we were trying to do is to create big worlds the size of Halo that would last for a decade or more, unfolding across all media platforms, including those that don't exist yet, which takes a real kind of creative, strategic way of thinking about how you structure possibilities for narrative and not just a single story in a 3-act structure. And that's really what we're kind of training our kids to do at the World Building Media Lab and the World Building Institute, because what we're built off of or based off of was our founder, Alex McDowell, who's a big production designer, did Fight Club, Man of Steel, Minority Report. He created this system in which, for Minority Report, they went out and took that first base idea of what if you could predict the future within a limited amount of time, limited amount of space, and then say what stories unfold out of that. And so that's why for Minority Report, you have not just this procedural of Tom Cruise, running through Washington, D.C., but you have this super skyscraper structure on the other side of the Potomac based on the real world laws of Washington, D.C. You have these kind of vertical car pods, going across the landscape, and you also have these gestural interfaces, right? And the side effect of that was when you go out and talk to all these real world experts in this world building process, a lot of them tend to say, it's like, oh, well, I would do this. I would have these autonomous cars or whatever. And then they would say, well, actually, I don't need your fictional world to do that. So we're going to just try making it anyway. And over 100 real world patents fell out of the world building process for Minority Report. And so what we're trying to do with all of our students, from screenwriters to producers to architects to economists, is to get them thinking along that what if, then what, then what, then what, so what, kind of a practice to build opportunities for rethinking not just how we build fictional worlds, but the real world as well.
So the summary is, this is Jeff,
Hi.
and he's from the future. Thank you.
We all wear hats.
Moving down the line.
Hey everyone, thanks for coming. I'm Pete Blumel. I'm the CEO and creative director over at the Rogue Initiative. And in a nutshell, we are creating virtual reality experiences where we're marrying AAA game developers with established Hollywood talent and filmmakers to build things in VR that we can springboard into other mediums. We have a production deal with Michael Bay, which is amazing. There's some other things on our slate that are all meant to do exactly this kind of thing. So not quite what you expect from hearing that, but we have some things up our sleeves, and it all goes back into also world building and building out franchises and really kind of grabbing VR as a new medium and launching IP out of that.
Great.
Perfect. And I'm Greg Coleman. I head up marketing and franchise management at the Walt Disney Animation Studios. And I think one of the most exciting projects or in recent history was working on Frozen, which has really taken the world by storm and truly is a great test case of what a true franchise is like and how we take our content and kind of plug into a much larger narrative across our company and throughout the world.
Cool.
Hi, I'm Justin Booth Clibborn, not Clibborn Booth. And I am the CMO and Head of Business Development at PsyOp. It stands for Psychological Operations. Our mission is to persuade, change, and influence. And we do that by creating content that people want to watch and share, mainly in the marketing space. You'll probably know us from the work that we've done over the last 3 years with Clash of Clans, where Supercell and their ad agency, Barton Graff. So we've created all the advertising around Clash of Clans that's garnered around about 1 billion views at this point, and really speaks to what we do best, which is really get to the heart of a brand and express that in content that blurs the line between marketing and entertainment.
Great.
Hi, I'm Christina Mancini. I'm Executive Vice President of Franchise over at 20th Century Fox. I launched the group about 2.5 years ago. Our CFO decided that it was something that we needed to really start focusing on when you consider the breadth of our portfolio that we have at 20th Century Fox. In the absence of like a super robust consumer products program or like the theme parks and some of the natural hooks that you would assume around franchises, we've decided to focus on engagement and leveraging technology to tell additional stories across these platforms. And we've been also thinking about how to activate against our 21st Century Fox reach in order to reach a global audience with these franchises that are resonating on a global level. And before that, I was also at Fox still. I spent 12 years running our worldwide marketing and PR division in distribution, which means that anything that was produced by 20th Century Fox, I would work with our international and domestic partners to make sure that it was properly marketed and publicized. So we would try to make sure that if there was a brand, it would be localized to the territory and still retain its the DNA of what it is, but still resonate with local audiences. Nowadays here, I guess our main competitors are the content creators that are popping up with everybody having their own connected smartphone in their pocket, Facebook Live, Snapchat, etc. Back in the day, it was just in TV. Our biggest competitor wasn't other studios, it was local programming.
Great. Well, as you can see, the diversity of perspectives and points of view is sort of the cohesion that is required when thinking about franchising, and so I think we just have such a great panel. And I actually want to springboard, Christina, I'll start with you off of how you laid out what the purview of your role is. Silly as it may sound, I'm wondering if you might, and everyone sort of offered a little taste of this, but might, in your words, define franchise. I know that's silly. We know, we've heard the word. It used to mean, McDonald's. It used to mean fast food restaurants. Sequels are not anything new. There have been sequels to movies for many, many generations. And franchising seems like it used to be more defensive, but now all of you are taking more of an offensive perspective when it comes to franchising. So love if you might define the franchise for us a little.
So I think, again, at Fox, we've taken a slightly different approach. We were speaking about this earlier. I did a keynote at a Microsoft event, I guess a couple of months ago, and before I had a chance to do my keynote, I had a gentleman come up and offer to buy one of my franchises. And I thought maybe he was a producer. He wanted to know if I had all the same rights, and it turned out that he had in the past maybe bought Planet Hollywood franchises. So while we're in entertainment and we tend to, as soon as you say franchise, you kind of know what we're talking about. When you step outside of it and you speak to brands and other companies, it's not naturally doesn't mean the same thing to them. So no, I'm not selling hot dogs. I'm I'm trying to build out these franchises. So historically, franchises at Fox are sequels. But we are moving more into a world-building brand extension strategy as well.
Great, and actually I'd use this opportunity. Does anybody have a different point of view, want to add, amend, sort of a jump ball at this point?
Sure, I wouldn't disagree with anything you've said. I think certainly at Disney Animation is a very similar experience. Our philosophy is that all of our franchises begin with great storytelling, and for my business unit, that means great films. And so our Chief Creative Officer, John Lasseter, comes from a story background, and he infuses in the storytellers, the artists, the filmmakers in our studio the ability to tell not just good stories, but great stories. And the way that Disney works is we can then look for extensions of those stories in different mediums as well. If that's publishing, as we did for Frozen, or if it's a Disney on Ice show, that is another way to expose yourself to the story, characters, and world from our film, then that's a wonderful extension. That extends also into digital, into the video games and mobile games, and any other consumer product or anything else that you can imagine. Obviously, we have the luxury of having a great park service that around the world we've got different parks that we can take our characters and put them into and let consumers experience the world in a different way. So if you love Anna and Elsa, you can actually meet them at our parks, and that's a different way to view a franchise than I think the historical way to say that it's only about film one and then a sequel that comes after that. We have a much more comprehensive view, which I think you also expressed.
So part of that, I think, is a generational pivot, right? So back when a lot of us were growing up, back in the 70s and 80s, a traditional franchise deal actually did feel a lot more like McDonald's, right? Where you as an IP owner would be handed a check from somebody that was looking to obtain the rights to publish a book based on your story world, or to do a particular tie-in based on your story world. And a lot of these were just straight up adaptations, right? But what we're seeing now with those of us that are more digital natives, speaking of digital natives, is this kind of expectation that these worlds that we're buying into are more than a single story, right? That it is a kind of universe that we can move through. And the design challenge that we're facing now, and all of this is largely a design challenge, I would argue, is how do you discover, collect, consume, react, to each of those components in it? Like if I go to see a movie, how do I find out that there's a TV show that's also based on that film, or that is an extension of that film, later on? And what we're moving towards increasingly is this sort of attitude of entertainment as a service, right? Where you are subscribing almost to these IPs that you're interested in, and these worlds that we engage with kind of come to us with new drops of content, which is largely a business model, right? It's true that it is 7 times harder to obtain a new customer than it is to keep an old one. So that if you have somebody's interest, that is gained by the big splash of a new major blockbuster film, how do you keep that interest? How do you sustain that design? That franchise design is kind of what we're struggling with now.
Just to add to that, for us at Fox, really paying attention and understanding to how fans and consumers are interacting with our content is a really large focus for us. So we collaborate a lot with our filmmakers as well, and our creative executives, and they're always on board to understand also what are fans doing and what conversations are actually happening around this content. in this day and age with all these platforms. And again, everybody creating content, we want people to create content around our content so that we can do a better job of understanding what is resonating with them. We don't really have to, in future, hopefully guess what extensions you would like to see, because you're telling us. We just are trying to do a better job of listening.
Yeah, I think I'll just add my 2 cents from, and I agree with all this, but I spent 8 years at Amblin on the film side, then moving to an Infinity Ward where we created the Call of Duty franchise, and specifically where I was at for 8 years in the Modern Warfare series. The big difference was learning what people wanted and understanding the franchise is what the fans decided. Like, if they really liked it and they played it, then you become a franchise. And so as many of those happy accidents as you can create are always positive. And at the end of the day, though, really, my 2 cents and what I learned was engaging the community and having them help you build the franchise and hoping you're doing the right things and then seeing what happens when you put it out there. And if they like it, then they actually create the franchise for you. Otherwise, you're your brand and not necessarily franchise.
And what's so exciting about that from my point of view, because we always come, excuse me, things from a brand marketing, brand building, an awareness point of view. So, our history of our company is in classic advertising. So, 5-10 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago, we were just making commercials, and it was all very simple. And we didn't really worry about where they went, or franchises, or IP, things like that. But now, what's exciting about this panel, and even being invited to this panel and talking about these subjects, is what it says about the way that we need to entertain. And I've been peddling this story to brands and agencies, well, mainly to brands, for a long time, that we need to, whatever we do needs to be entertaining. Otherwise, people will switch off. Mm-hmm. They will go and find something else to entertain them. And so now I'm involved I'm probably the newest member of this panel to the word franchise. But the fact that I'm even here speaks to what's going on in the world of marketing and brands are slowly waking up to this idea that you got to entertain, duh.
Well, that's great, and to pivot off of exactly what you're saying, to encapsulate is entertainment to promote and market entertainment, which means that there's not just an awareness prerogative and imperative, but there's a content imperative. And so what I'm really curious about is, we know that there are certain tried and true methods for evaluating a screenplay for a feature film. You determine if it's viable. There is a process for rewrites and more rewrites and more rewrites and all the things that happen in order to make a screenplay a viable blueprint to make a film. But when it's entertainment in service of entertainment, what are some of the checks that you use to maintain quality when, in essence, the work of supporting, say, a feature is as critical in terms of the fidelity as the actual main product? And I'd love to hear from anyone who wants to jump in.
Yeah, maybe I can start with this, because I think our studio does a wonderful job of actually starting the storytelling from a very compelling place. And I think we do this a little bit differently than some other industries and perhaps even other studios in terms of how we create our films. We have a director-driven studio, which means that our stories actually don't come from a mandate from somewhere else. They come from the passion of these artists and storytellers who have spent their entire lives developing the skill of telling a compelling story. And so it's really a series of passion projects that come through, and as those get pitched in and ultimately greenlit by John Lasseter, the thing that comes in to influence that storytelling is a tremendous amount of research. So our filmmakers will go out and study anything from the way that snow is formed and the way that it looks like when you're moving through an environment such as in Frozen. Filmmakers went to Norway. They went to different parts that are very snowy, and they researched that, and that shows in the filmmaking. There's also certain things that you learn by this deep research of understanding the background, the time frame that your story takes place in, the characters in the world that you're developing, and that manifests its way all the way through the film process of actually being created into a visually stunning and entertaining film experience. but it also gets infused later when we want to do something, let's say for a video game or for a publishing experience or even something that lives in our parks. It all comes from the same place of really understanding the characters, the story, the environment that they're in, and being able to use the source material, in this case the film, as a way to inform those other aspects that we do. So I would say, getting back to how do we define quality, I think it comes from having excellent storytellers who research the story, the environment, and the world that they're creating, and putting compelling characters into those situations and letting that manifest over different experiences.
There's a fine line when you are trying to figure out how to create something that is completely modular, so telling a story that is completely self-contained with no opportunities for other things to patch in, and something that is way too open, so that it leaves people dissatisfied. When we were looking for how to evaluate extensions into our worlds, what we were thinking about was how can something serve as a first point of contact into the story world? How can it be additive into the rest of the story world? But also how can it be awesome on its own, right? So you start looking for why would somebody want to engage with this? Why would somebody be interested in this? What does this particular thing have to offer? Even if it is marketing content, right? Because a lot of the time these kinds of extensions are thought of as advertising you can sell, right? And that's okay, and that's not at all a bad thing if what it is sufficiently awesome to be, as we said, entertainment is supportive of other entertainment. So to look for what is a mystery in the overall thing that this extension starts to solve, and then what are new mysteries that this thing starts to open up that would pull people deeper and deeper into that world.
And what's interesting about it, what's fun about it, is that you can't, sometimes it's important not to overanalyze and not to overthink it and kind of let the thing take. I mean, from what I've heard, I don't Frozen to be such an amazing hit. It resonates so much. I have two daughters and they've seen it like 36 times in the last month. But we did by way of example, we did probably the project that put us on the map 10 years ago was a spot we did for Coca-Cola called The Happiness Factory, and it came out of classic marketing. Just to build on what you were saying, came out of classic marketing brief. It's like we're selling happiness, and we got the idea from the agency. It's like, oh, guy walks up to a Coke machine, puts a coin in, and then we enter the world of the Coke machine, and what happens? How is that Coke bottle delivered? And how is each Coke bottle delivered with the maximum amount of happiness? And that was literally the brief. And so over the course of 4 days, we built this world of the Happiness Factory filled with these wonderful characters who evolved to deliver this bottle in the most amazing way, and each had an individual job to do from the time that the coin went in to the time that the bottle reached the person's hand. It somehow, again, it was just a commercial. It was a 90-second spot, but it somehow tapped into the DNA of the brand and really resonated, and they ran it in 192 countries, and it became the most successful spot that they'd ever made by every measure, because Coke is a beloved brand, and it really tapped into. And then it became this franchise that we worked on for 5 years. So sometimes it can just happen, and that's the beauty of the industry, and that's people like me who work in commercials and marketing look at the movie industry with envy, because sometimes you see that movie and it just happens. That's what makes it a creative industry. That's what makes it fun.
I think the relevance, and I'm sure everyone in here understands why we have to do all of these extensions, but everything is not like a huge revenue generator, right? Like we're trying to all understand how to get into the VR business, but why? It goes back to what I said at the beginning with we're no longer for consumers' attention. We're competing with every other entertainment option that they have in a specific time period. So how do you cut through the clutter? You have to find these experiences that they want to participate in, those will help them actually pay attention when this incredible next movie comes out, because they feel more invested in it and it resonates for them. Like, how do you reach them? So I think VR is just another example of creating an incredibly immersive experience for them to go deeper into this world and have like an even deeper connection with these franchises.
Well, that's a great segue to talking a little bit more about technology in general, because it seems like there's room for experimentation and almost a necessity for experimentation in order to go where the audience might be, because the opportunity or the necessity is to build awareness. So I'm curious how you think about sort of a two-part question. Number one, technology in general, going to what's proven or going to what's new, and how you balance that. And then consumer expectations. Consumers have expectations that a movie's going to entertain them, but are they starting to develop expectations between the movies for the franchise? Has the franchise become tangible? So tech and then expectations are sort of what I'd love to talk about. To anybody that might want to jump in first.
I will quickly wreck my sandbox and then dismantle it and let everybody else talk. I think that just because a platform exists does not mean that it's the correct platform for content. I think that you really need to be mindful of making sure that your narrative matches the experience on the platform. There's a lot of cool platforms. There's new tech and new platforms emerging every day, and at the studios we're like, fantastic, let's put everything on it. I think we need to just do a better job of taking a beat and making sure that if we are going to create an experience on the content everywhere and all of these extensions, you never really know what touch point a new fan's going to come in through, and you need it to be the best possible experience for them to want to continue to experience this world further.
Yeah, I tend to agree just with that. Understand the demo before you go into a certain tech platform. That's very important, I think. We're on the same page for sure on that, I think. And then as far as expectations, I think they're still forming. I think we look at Marvel doing an amazing job of saying, hey, we've got this feature franchise, and a TV show could sit somewhere in a mobile game. And so it's happening. I don't necessarily personally feel like, man, I've got to see something else in this. But it's becoming more and more prevalent, at least to me. I didn't expect it like a year ago, but I'm really feeling like, hey, there could be a really cool story out of this. And now that they're kind of coming around, Agent Carter and things like that are good examples of those base hits that are super compelling in and of themselves, let alone part of a bigger world. So I think it's getting there.
Yeah.
I think our kids will really expect that,
Right.
to answer your question.
Make it good.
Yeah. Just got to be good. If it
Make
doesn't,
it great.
It's got to be good. I mean, how many VR experiences have we all seen that's like are crappy, and it's like, oh, but it's VR. I don't give a shit. It's
Right.
like it's not good. And I mean, look at 3D TV, and 3D films. I mean, it was killed by the fact that so many people jumped on that bandwagon and then made these really crappy conversions of 3D movies. And there are so many examples of people that just jump on technological bandwagon and don't think about story, and don't think about just making it good, whatever it is. Don't let the technology be in service of or trump the story. Even big budget visual effects films, everybody's really surprised when a big budget visual effects film comes out and it's good. Everybody's like, it's actually good. Because people get really excited about the amount of money that they're spending or the technology that they're using. It's like, start with a good script. Why can't they just start with a good script? I never get that.
I think Avatar is an example of a big movie that taught us what the 3D experience was supposed to be like.
Amen.
And we need to find that experience that we can have in VR so that people will go, oh, this, because all of us have, and I'm sure many have had the opportunity to experience a lot of these platforms at the different tech companies, and you really see what's possible. But that type of like narrative to carry it, I don't think we've really seen just yet what it is and what's possible with it.
Right.
The second part of your question, first of all, I completely agree with tell great stories and then find ways to extend that in different avenues if there's an appetite. And I think the second part of your question was, has there become a desire from consumers to engage in franchises? And I would kind of slightly say in our world that I would say it slightly differently, which is if we tell a great story, if we create a wonderful film, you're going to want to engage with those characters in multiple different ways. You're going to want to share the experience and take that in a new way. So say, for example, you watch Zootopia and you love the characters within that film, you're going to want to go to our park and maybe meet the character, or you may want to wear a t-shirt that shows off something about the film that you love. But I think it's all about, everything goes back to great storytelling and finding a way to do that in different platforms. It all begins with the film and then extends beyond that. And I think one of the things that we always endeavor to do is have an emotional level and sometimes play on a deeper layer when we create our stories. And I think this is what really separates some of the content that we've created as a studio over the last, in our 92-year history, that you can go all the way back to Snow White, and there's still something about that film that resonates with people 92 years after the fact, and that's a really outstanding thing that we can be proud of.
One of the beautiful things about Disney and its repertoire of different story worlds is how different people, you don't see people just walking around with the same Disney shirts, right? They're Disney t-shirts of different Disney characters or different sub-franchises within those kind of worlds. For me to wear a Jessica Jones t-shirt is a radically different message to give people than if I'm wearing a Tangled t-shirt, right? And part of that gets down to this idea of what is it about that world that resonates with people and why, right? So to turn a character into a love mark, to use marketing language, you have to identify what that is about that character that turns into something that people want to communicate to other people about themselves as a kind of shorthand for themselves. It's one of the reasons why the the houses of Harry Potter are so freaking powerful as a generator of deep, passionate engagement with that story world. Because if I ask you, or if I even see you across the room, that you're wearing the colors of Ravenclaw, and I'm wearing the colors of Gryffindor, and that poor guy back there is wearing the colors of Slytherin, that is us telling each other something about ourselves so that we can communicate our philosophies, right? So just rolling that kind of thing into the worlds that you're building, that was one of the things I was looking for back at Microsoft, about worlds that were worthy of investing in.
You have a Tangled t-shirt?
I have a 4-year-old daughter, so I guarantee you that I will very shortly.
I think what Pete said resonates though as well. Like, we need to invite the community in earlier. So when I say I'm interested in what consumers are doing, so if a fan is wearing a T-shirt that is, you're saying like, I love Frozen, I love Elsa, but if you're on DeviantArt or Wattpad and you're actually creating content, a narrative, I think that is a new level of participation. And I'm really interested in understanding who those fans are and what they're doing and where they're doing it, so that I can reach out to them and have them do more and see if there's other like franchises that they might be interested in, because there's a lot of affinity, especially at 20th Century Fox, where we have so much sci-fi genre.
I'm interested in the feedback loop as an extension of talking about community or ways in which fans can convey their points of view. So I'm interested in the feedback loop when, say, something from one of the other arms of a 360-degree campaign then wind up in maybe a sequel, or kind of what that ebb and flow is, where the community might contribute something that becomes front and center, if there are examples or points of view on that.
I have one fun example. I'm not sure it exactly answers your question, but so the Clash work that we do every time we make a spot for Clash, which, let's face it, is advertising. I'm not pretending it's not, but it's art, it's entertaining, people love it. We put it out. It usually gets about 30 million views over a weekend, and some of the better known spots have actually generated fans dressing up as the characters from the game and then reenacting scene by scene the shots from the commercial, and then putting that out on YouTube.
That's a fan.
Which is amazing. Which is kind of amazing. It's advertising, people.
But you have fans.
Yeah,
Like,
there are fans. But it speaks to it speaks to the entertainment points. Like, make it entertaining. Yeah, there's a pack shot at the end, but it's entertaining. It's fun. you know.
And clearly it speaks to the fidelity of the work you did in support of fidelity of another piece, and then the echo chamber now creates this, and so that is a great example of the sort of feedback loop that I'm referring to.
So I tell people that if Twitter had existed when Empire Strikes Back came out and hashtag Boba Fett had suddenly started trending, that Lucas would probably have had, like little web comics or whatever with Boba Fett up for sale for 99 cents a pop the next morning. If you are a shrewd enough business person and are listening to what the fans want, you are able to leverage that engagement almost instantly using our contemporary channels in order to deepen that engagement. My favorite example of this in contemporary media is probably Derpy. The kind of gray cross-eyed pony from My Little Pony that was an animation error in the background of one of the shots, and all of a sudden the big fans were like, who's the goofy little cross-eyed pony in the background of that shot? And they started building this whole little character around her, and then the next thing you know, she's a recurring character with actual lines in the latest season of this as a kind of fan reinforcement, a deepening thing, because those of us that are fans of the show, again, 4-year-old daughter, I swear that show is God's gift to dads.
You got that T-shirt too. You got that T-shirt too.
But it almost becomes an in-joke, to the point where when the fans see that the franchise is responding to that level of engagement and bringing back these fan favorite characters, they're like, they care.
They want to be heard.
Yeah.
They want to be heard.
Yeah,
we have Kingsman. We had one movie. There was a still from the first movie, and it was the Knights of the Round Table, and fans went in and started trying to guess who everybody is and trying to make backstory, because there's not a lot of, because it's brand new IP, so there's not a lot of backstory around it. So Percival had one word, they blew him up, but he's a fan favorite. There's tons of art up on DeviantArt and narratives on Wattpad and fanfic creating additional extensions of who Percival is.
Yeah, that's what Reddit's for. Sometimes I look at that just to see what's going on. Right? People have thought of all kinds of fiction for things that don't even exist or haven't even thought of, that they are absolutely certain are planned in the show and such. So it's always amazing when you check it out.
To include VR and AR from the title of the discussion of the VR track. We would give franchises the opportunity to do it, but extending your franchise to the brand into VR and AR.
We've been coerced, evidently, into the Q&A portion here. That will count as your question. We can certainly talk more about VR and AR. I think and I'll just quickly say, and then turn it back over, but a little bit in defense of the conversation that's taken place, is I think franchising is a little bit more of the overall blueprint. And yes, you are right, we are in a VR, AR track. But I think the point that was made before is that the blueprint and the sense that when you're building out a franchise, it needs to be the right move when you're looking at these technology footprints. That said, it would be interesting to think about, I'd love to hear, because we've talked a little bit about VR, if there are specific VR projects that anybody would like to...
Well, I just wanted, for the gentleman, for VR, because it is an expensive undertaking, actually understanding what somebody would want to experience in that environment is really critical to us understanding which franchise we should put in it and what is the extra narrative that needs to go into it, so that we're not just, again, making unremarkable content that's just out there. So if we are creating a VR experience, it needs to be amazing. It needs to honor the actual franchise or IP that we are putting into it. It's not as easy as putting up a website. So there's a lot of thought that goes into it. So Josh was trying to make sure that we had some sort of understanding of the thought process that goes into such an expensive undertaking. But
and to all the creators out there, again, on the subject of making it good, use the medium for what it is. Don't just put something out there that just because it's VR, because it's trendy, which I think a lot of people are doing. We did a again, back to Clash of Clans. We did a VR experience last year that we put out for ClashCon that was in Helsinki last year. Where it was a 90-second pre-rendered experience where you're standing on the parapet of the castle with the archer next to you and the giants coming at you, and the fans loved it. They went crazy for it. And in fact, the biggest problem, we had 11 different gears, and we cycled through about 2,000 people. And in fact, the biggest problem they had was being asked when the VR version of the game is coming out, which was kind of a problem for them. But it was just a gear. But for other experiences, I guess I would ask people to really try and move the medium forward and try and use the medium for in new ways. And sometimes I guess that's it gets experimental, so you might fail, but don't just do it because it's the trendy thing to do. It is expensive, but
Pete, your business model. Yeah, I was going to say your business model is central to VR. If you want to speak to.
Yeah, I mean, I think really it's you've got to mitigate cost and scope at least this early on, and find the right places to engage with the right content and things like that. And I think a lot of us are still learning what not to do in VR, but really to me, the experience of being in the new world or something. I was the EP on another project called Good Lord Tunes, which just released, and when we were first starting that, we created this kind of tune-looking level, and putting people in that Toon Town was really compelling, and they felt complete. They've never seen it before, right? That was still really new, and I'm talking, this is 2 years ago when we were pitching this out. But all of VR is meant to be like, it's back to why VR. People ask that lots of very good questions. Ask yourself, the why and after, and so what, right? Those are two very important things.
And what makes it repeatable.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, experiencing something really helps engage. We all realize that as you experience something, there's so much more, retention is magnified, much more than simply reading or hearing or hearing a third-hand story. So if you can try to compel someone into getting into VR, checking it out, we all know conversion is pretty high in VR. Someone tries it, they're usually very compelled to try it again. It really blows away most people. Even things that are sort of mediocre. So if you really hit something amazing and say this is a taste of the world, and we can build this out in a traditional game, in more VR episodes, potentially as a series in animation made out of the engine, or as a feature film that we've also have, there's certainly a spoke going out that way. That's where I think VR really is compelling to me, at least personally, from a storytelling. There's all sorts of things in VR that we can do. We all know about medicine and tech and other things, but for the purposes of digital Hollywood, I think really if you want people to understand and embrace your world, it's the same thing as going into a pitch in a traditional studio and saying, I've got this graphic novel. Well, if you can show the creative exec this world, they'll get so much easier. And if it's well done and it's compelling and there is a story behind it, you've won half the battle. Right?
That would be an expensive pitch.
It would be a very expensive pitch, indeed, yes.
The line that we kept coming back to was that line from Jurassic Park. You spent so much time thinking if you could do something, you never stopped to think if you should. And trying to figure out, okay, as you're saying, what is it about VR that gets somebody into that world, and then how do you figure out how to make more of that or to do that better is the trick. But the problem with that is to start saying, well, then everything should be in VR, which is simply not true. Drawing on some hard-learned lessons from Microsoft days, Kinect and the Wii, the gesture interface, that went with all that. Do you remember back when everybody was like, that's the future of gaming, controllers are dead, everybody's just gonna be swiping their arms around and blah, blah, blah. Well, what you find out is that this is really tiring, right? And so you have these people that want to get into these video games and spend 20 hours at a stretch on their couch with their Cheetos, and all of a sudden, that is directly contrary to their audience engagement motivations, is to suddenly make them start getting up and running around their living rooms, right? So that same kind of audience motivation is more likely to be interested in lean back VR experiences, where you put on the headset and it's basically just the super IMAX screen, kind of a thing, than they are in room scale experiences where they have to be getting up and running around their living rooms. And the challenge is to figure out where on that spectrum from lean back to lean forward is the ideal sweet spot for your particular audience, for your particular medium, or your particular content. Right? So if you can line that up, that's where I think you've got a really big hit. But to get back to that idea of what motivates people, why do people go to theme parks? Now, what is it about Disneyland or Disney World that motivates people to go?
I think it's the connection with a story that and the connection with the characters, and that comes from an emotional place of wanting to engage with characters who you've come to fall in love with.
But so it's not enough to simply be looking around and realizing that you're in Toontown. It's all the different characters that are in Toontown, or the things you can do in Toontown that would motivate people to go to Disneyland and visit Toontown.
Yeah, and I would say as it relates to as it relates to my business unit, one of the most compelling things is this is a new platform for storytelling. So what we end up doing with this, and Disney just announced a partnership with Oculus, which I can't get into details on, but we have a history of trying new technology, and what works on one platform is not going to be the same as what works on another. The closest parallel I can draw is coming from when everything online became kind of the norm, and then all of a sudden you switched to smartphones and looked at a different screen size and a different experience there. You can't adapt what works online to what works on a different platform. Same is true here in VR. We are excited about the opportunity of telling new stories on a new technology platform that enables you to experience things in a completely more, in a different immersive way. And as storytellers, that's a very exciting and brand new frontier that we're figuring out along the way, and we've got a lot of great minds thinking about how to do that. But as our studio connects with it, it will always be about telling a compelling story that somehow advances or gives another avenue towards the story, characters, and world. It all comes back to that.
At Telltale, when we work on various properties, be it Marvel, Batman, Walking Dead, we often talk about, and this is a gaming term, player agency. Mm-hmm. And what's interesting about world building, franchise management is that the idea of giving the consumer, the fan, the agency to make a choice to explore something that she or he wants to explore more, it seems that VR and other future technologies can create a level of intimacy, but at the same time, the risk is that you want that environment or you want that experience to not negate, but you want it to be additive. And that's what I think is interesting about VR and AR from a franchise building perspective. I'd love to open up to questions at this point.
Well, I'm going to follow up on what you just said real quick, because Christina nailed it when she brought up Avatar as the example of 3D done well. And you'll notice that the difference between how Avatar used 3D and how something like Pirates of the Caribbean used 3D was in Avatar, it didn't get in the way of the experience. It didn't bounce you out of it. It didn't disrupt your suspension of disbelief. It was very, very subtle. And those opening shots, where you see Jake floating in front of the ship, and that ship just seems like it goes back forever, is a very subtle, very nuanced use of 3D as opposed to the sword coming through the door in Pirates of the Caribbean. So what we need to do in order to develop this as a storytelling technology beyond just a gimmick is to understand what it is about VR that is so entrancing and to use that in a more mature way than I think just the, oh, look, we're checking the box, we're doing something fun in VR, trap might lead us into.
Yeah, I think it was creating an escape. I think the short answer to your in a sense. Escape from reality, albeit a short amount of time, whether in a theme park or in virtual reality.
So we know that entertainment as a service, but this is panel as a service to the shout out from the crowd. So we appreciate you motivating us. Let's have some questions.
Hi, I have a question for Christina. I know Fox has been kind of really building out the location-based entertainment side of the business. Is that under your purview as part of franchise management? Can you maybe kind of expand on it a little bit?
So that is part of the consumer products area, but much like my colleague here, we try to make sure that as they do that, they stay true to what the actual narrative is. So you don't want to go to, because our location-based are not just focusing on the film entities, they're also going to be looking at the television experience as well. So they're really starting to build out, I guess, more the, I think Alien is going to be one of the main ones, which is also at Universal now. So, but yes, there's a whole division that is like focusing on that. And VR is actually part of those conversations, with Void, trying to understand like what experiences we can create without having to create a gigantic theme park.
They're doing sort of like live action theatrical performance.
That is yes, we have a lot. We're like Fox's 20th is a great company. It's very entrepreneurial. So we have a lot of different areas that have been creating additional extensions around a lot of these different franchises. And currently what we're doing is kind of bringing it all back together so that we can have, really more on-target storytelling around these different franchises.
Great. Yeah, in the black here, and then we'll go over.
I can tell you what happened with 3D is in 2011 when we lost the 3D multiple for the engagement. The studios decided to go fast and cheap, and so they're doing it, essentially the whole show in less than a month without any good creative engagement from the creative principals at all. It's just going to go to usually deluxe, very convenient. So that may be an object lesson.
Oh, yeah. Great. Go there, and then we'll go. He's asking about the business model, the challenge of independent developers selling VR experiences because of the overhead cost, and what it might be the business model for selling these types of new next-gen experiences at the studio level.
Yeah, so I can just say for Disney Animation, if you look at our business unit, we endeavor to tell compelling stories theatrically. And those stories take a life of their own in different experiences that we have through publishing and all the other categories. When we think of VR, in a lot of ways it's a new frontier, and our focus is really advancing the storytelling and sharing that with an audience that wants to know more about our characters and stories. So we're not driven from the focus is not driven from a business model and how do we plug into this business model. The focus is, for us, it is all about how do we tell a compelling story, and does this platform offer a new way to engage with an audience in some aspects. So I think that's kind of the lens that we view it through.
Yeah, again, it's going to sound like a broken record, but make it good is the mantra, and people don't want to be sold to these days. And I work in advertising and marketing. They don't want to be sold to. They'll switch off if they feel they're being sold to, unless you're telling them something that's going to help them improve their lives and make things better. They don't want to be sold to. So I agree with you. Don't make it promotional. I mean, if Fox did The Martian. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that experience, that full experience with like the vibrating chair and all that was great, but it wasn't. My understanding is, you may correct me if I'm wrong, is that it came out kind of either after the movie, so it wasn't really a promotional thing, and they look upon it as a standalone. And it was great. It was a great experience. They spent a lot of money and a lot of time on making it really good, and it's having a good effect.
I think there's I can't take credit for the VR portion of what we're doing at Fox, apart from the fact that I'm trying to work closely with them to inform the stories that they are telling. And again, that goes back to my original statement, which was we need to understand what stories people want to see more of that warrant having such an immersive experience, because it is a costly endeavor, and it is a lot of resources, so we don't want to just make promotional things infinity, right? So now that we are getting down all of the nuts and bolts, we really do want to do a better job of creating engaging content. That's what I think I chimed in. I was like, where is the repeatability? Repeatability. That's when you are going to actually buy something and engage with it in more than just a promotional way. But you need to understand, we don't really have like the right research yet to tell us like, this is going to be a slam dunk. And that's where we're kind of looking to the fans to understand who is using it, what they want to see, what experiences are working, so that we can really double down on that in the VR group. And any other mobile games, anything location-based entertainment, we want to do a better job of understanding what you would like to see, as opposed to me on the Fox lot thinking something's cool. Like, that's not a really great business model. But you in the back in the red have been raising your hand forever. You're speaking very closely to something that, sorry, near and dear to my heart. I don't really look at four quadrants when I'm looking at fans. I look at fandoms and like who the fans are and what they're doing, because some days if you're watching what I'm doing, you might think I am a 13-year-old boy, and some days I'm like an 80-year-old grandma.
Don't all movies have to tick the four quadrants now? Isn't that what I heard? They all have to fulfill the four quadrants, otherwise...
Everything's an audience. But the reality is you need to understand who is doing what, and within there's different levels of fandom and what they're interested in. And that goes back to the original point of like, who are they, what are they doing, and how do we get them to do it with us, and how do we create experiences that can help inform us as we create additional extensions.
Yeah, I think another follow-up for that is, as we look at storytelling, we don't make films for kids. It's kind of a common misconception that Disney Animation, oh yeah, they're creating films for kids. We create films, kids live in an adult world. So we make our content always for the oldest and kind of like the widest genre. And if you tell a story in the right way, it's going to be appealing to all of those different groups along the way. We're not targeting the storytelling itself for a specific audience segment. It's a much broader swath that we're going for. And if you look at the history of storytelling, it's been that way since the origins of time. There's you go back in fables and things of old, and those stories are, yes, they're appealing to kids, but there's a common thread that we as humans need to connect, and one of those is just the ability to tell stories that last test of time.
Just follow up on that real quick. If you look at some of the best four-quadrant properties right now, they're ones that are very deliberately creating stories that do appeal across multiple demographics, but are engineering those kind of conversational moments across disparate components that are targeting different groups. So if you look at Doctor Who with the adult spin-off of Torchwood and the more youth-centric spin-off of the Mary Jane Chronicles, or if you look at Star Wars right now with the more adult extensions into books, but also the younger extensions into Star Wars Rebels. Like, what you're seeing are these very clearly engineered, conversation points between different parts of a family.
I'm excited to hear your question.
AR, no one was really talking about beforehand. You've had some success in making it to adoption. Who was
Thank you. No, actually,
Agreed.
we were-
Those are great ideas. Those are great ideas. I'm sorry?
You can't use storytelling anymore.
I can't use storytelling.
But what I would like, what I would like to
Storytelling.
what I would like to say is, it all starts with story.
Yes.
You didn't say anything about me.
But I would throw back to you so even in your response or even in your statement there, one of the things that you want to see is Elsa doing her magic, and my question is why, right? Why would you want to do that? Because you've seen some content, you've engaged with that, you've enjoyed that, and that is story. So I understand what you're saying, but I think there's a connection that and I'm biased, right? I sit by our filmmakers all day long. I'm in the business unit that creates these movies, so I'm with the storytellers, with the artists, with the technology teams that are putting this on screen, and that kind of centric viewpoint is that it all relates to how you're engaging with these characters, right? And so you want to see that.
Yeah, absolutely. We were talking about, Pete and I met to talk about today, and we were supposed to meet for like 30 minutes, and 2 hours later, we were still talking about what would constitute a real VR awesome experience. I'm not sure if you guys were familiar with Peregrines. We thought, if there's another one, so the experience inside of it would be inside the house. So there's, all of the kids have different powers. They're creepy. There's a doll that comes back to life. There's a kid who has bees who come out of his mouth. There's a character who eats from the. So you go, look, but you have to. You are a specific fan of a specific property, but what is the experience that you could have inside, or Alien, right? You're in outer space, you could be on a different spaceship, there's aliens, but how deep do you have to go to make it apart from the fact when the first alien pops up and you're scared. I almost cussed, and I've made the entire panel without cussing. You're scared. You're scared. How many times can I scare you? What is the deeper immersion into the universe that warrants making it so that it's not a promotional stunt?
One of the things that you were getting at with your question was, notice the verbs that you were using in that sentence, right? So whenever you're doing video game development, one of the things you have to figure out is what are the unique verbs that are attached to a particular character. If we were going to do a James Bond game and all he's doing is just running around shooting people, you could do that with any kind of a property. That's about the same as a Call of Duty thing where you're running around shooting people. But what differentiates James Bond from Call of Duty is the way that he dresses, or the way that he drinks, shaken not stirred, or the way that he does the spy things. If you can identify what those unique verbs are with your particular story world, like popping the claws in Logan, that's the kind of thing that people are going to experience in VR.
So we are
Thank
just
you.
about running out of time. I did promise that we would end here, so we would go here. So we will have to end on this question here. So make it good.
I think it's great that you're incorporating AR and VR in the theme park experience. And not only you're going to replace the hug you get from Mickey, but using AR in combination with that. I think that's great. Do you guys ever see a time where you're going to completely replace what we do now in the movies with VR? And how far out is that? And I assume a lot of the things you're doing now probably aren't very profitable in the VR space, but eventually we'll get to that point where you can make it profitable. How far out is that? Or do you even see that ever happen?
I don't know if it's replace it. I love VR. I'm obsessed with augmented and mixed reality. I think that is next gen 3D almost, because what is the extra experience that you need to have to fully immerse yourself in a movie theater with your friends so that you can experience it together? Because movie going is really about community as well. So what are the experiences that you can have in a movie theater watching that would be unique to an AR experience? That's something that I'm really focused on.
Yeah, I would say, when if you roll back in history a little bit, and when television first came out, that was going to kill the film business. Obviously, that didn't happen. And, as each new platform, or when home entertainment came out, that was going to kill the film business, and that didn't happen. These are different platforms. We consume content in different ways, and this is a new one for us to explore and continue to find new ways, but I don't think it will ever run the risk of supplementing the experience of what it's like to be in a movie theater with 300 people and experience together the joy of watching something that makes you laugh or cry or emote together as a big group. So,
and I'll just quickly say, as we do kind of run out the clock, that in some ways that was the very exploration of this panel to begin with, that the franchise can live and breathe where the consumer is, regardless of what that platform is, and to play to the strength of those particular platforms. So I think it's less about replacement, but more about playing to the strength, more about fulfilling the opportunity of the platform, whether that's interactive, linear, 360-degree experience, or something that is augmenting our reality today. So I just want to thank the panel.
Thank you.
Thank you, Josh.
And thank all of you for your excellent questions.